Alright, these are my thoughts on the Shonen Jump chapters released on December 21st, and the Hell's Paradise chapter from December 30th. First of all, Happy New Year, and second of all, let's get on to the chapters. So, My Hero 211 starts off by cutting back a little ways from the stuff that's going on right now, with a flashback in which Monoma tells Shinso that they're actually similar because Monoma was also told that with a quirk like his, he'd never be able to become a hero. And while they're in school, they kind of both need to manipulate people to get ahead, at least. That's the way Monoma sees it. He says that the paradox is that to become heroes, we must act unheroically. He's getting a lot of neat quotes these last several chapters. But back to the present, Deku's getting dragged around by these dark energy tendrils. They're like spikes, they're sticking to things, and they're pulling him through the air. He's getting flung all over, seemingly also uncontrollably releasing smashes. So there's like shockwaves going out everywhere too. The one good thing about this situation is that it looks like his gauntlet wasn't actually destroyed. Maybe uh, that was retconned away, perhaps. So it's more likely that his arm will be okay. So that's good, but the rest of the situation is still very bad. In fact, he says to himself that the pain is unbearable, and he has very high pain tolerance, so this is clearly not a fun time. And the chapter ends with Uraraka floating up and grabbing onto him to anchor him in place, and then yelling for Shinso. So the idea, I'm assuming, is to have Shinso use his brainwashing to forcibly turn off Deku's quirk. Although, considering the fact that One for All has been shown in the past to be able to activate even while Deku is being brainwashed, I'm not sure how likely it is that that'll work, but maybe because it's already active, things will apply differently. I'm not sure. 93, and the chapter opens with a shot of Kurisu Sensei's behind, which it feels like it's been a while since we've gotten one of those. Oh, with a little drama lately. So that was that was refreshing to have. But she seems to be having a hard time with something. And we cut over to Naruyuki, and he's at the bookstore picking up books to help the girls with their studies because he is still an absolute saint. But a book on pedagogy catches his eye. And for those who don't know, and to be fair, before I looked it up, I didn't know either, pedagogy is the field of academics. And since he thinks back to his conversation with Rizu while he's looking at it, it would imply that he's considering becoming a teacher or something. Although, since his suggestion is that his dream will cause him to give up the scholarship, maybe instead it's more along the path of tutoring, maybe. Because I'm pretty sure if you're going to become a teacher, you need to go to college to get a teaching degree. But at any rate, Kurisu Sensei is in the store as well, and she's got a lot of books, but they're actually all about parenting. And so Naruyuki says, congratulations, I guess, but uh, obviously she didn't suddenly become a mother during the past several chapters. She is babysitting for her. He decides that he should help her out because he's pretty sure that his services might be needed. Again, he's a saint. And it's pretty clear that she does need help. She doesn't really know how to take care of children because when the baby starts crying, she asks if she's worried about her career path. So teaching is really all that she's good at. Teaching and, I guess, figure skating. So Naruyuki helps out. He helps her uh, warm up a bottle of milk. He helps clean up the place because he realizes that her apartment is definitely not a good place for a baby. It's a disaster area, as always. And in the end, they try to put her down for a nap. Wants them both to stay with her, and they end up falling asleep before her. So she ends up and video chatting a video of the other two sleeping next to each other to Miharu. So this is not going to help her conspiracy theories about her older sister and Naruyuki. But we don't get to see how the two react when they wake up sleeping next to each other. I'm sure it would have been hysterical. But generally, it was nice to see Karisu Sensei again. That's always fun. And I am particularly excited about Naruyuki's pedagogical interest. My favorite moment from the chapter, though, was when he was helping test the milk, and Karisu Sensei said that she wasn't sure if she could tell heat properly since her body temperature is a bit warmer than some people's, and so he just licks it off the back of her hand. And the kicker is that she isn't even flustered because she says that honestly, your stuff has happened. 30 has Kawaki having made some headway on gluing the vase back together, which is neat. But he ends up deciding that it's going to take too much time to glue all of the pieces together. And Boruto says he's disappointed in him for not finishing it, but he seems, by Kawaki working on it at all, that he is willing to help him explore the applications of karma some more. Because he knows that Kawaki wants to learn more about it. And so they go out to spar under Naruto's supervision. And Kachin Koji sends his little spy toad after them. And also Delta sends a spy drone that is apparently built into her back after them also. So she is had quite a bit of experimentation done on her, clearly, after a little while. But Naruto tells him that, hey, if you're done fighting, you need to do the little unison sign thing. And so when they do, and their dominant hands are both the ones that have the karma on them, they end up both feeling a lot of pain in their hands. And in particular, Boruto sees a vision of Momoshiki Otsutsuki, which makes sense because it was after they beat him that it appeared in his hand, so it's almost certainly linked to him. What happened? Kachin Koji notices from through his spy toad that the scratches that Boruto had on his hand from their fight have healed, which suggests that karma has healing applications. What's most interesting about this, though, is he says that he hopes Jigen does not have that ability as well, or things will get problematic. So it seems like Koji is a double agent of sorts in the organization that he's in, which I suppose would make sense why it was so easy for him to get into the Leaf Village if maybe he is secretly a loyalist to them or something. I don't know. And so Delta actually, her spy drone has found the sparring match, and so she decides she wants to go and retrieve Kawaki. She doesn't care if she's going to set off the alarm, she's just going to go. And so sure enough, Ino senses her enter the village, or rather the airspace of the village, because her legs split open to reveal rocket boosters. So yeah, she's got a lot of weird adjustments made to her body. And so Ino contacts Naruto. It says that she's heading for him, and he says that he's got this. So we're going to see the Hokage in action. So that should be fun. Yeah, but interesting about Koji. We still don't know much about him and what his goals are. That may become clear in the coming months. My Hero Academia Vigilantes Chapter 44 was also in this batch. This will be the first one that I talk about on one of these, I think. And it starts with the Crawler being chased by a villain who has a train for a torso, except he still has normal legs, so he's just running. So I don't know what the advantage to having a train for a torso is, but I don't know. lots of weird, wacky villains in this series. And so Koichi leads him over to the drugstore where those two grasshopper shopkeepers are because he has a feeling Eraserhead's going to be there since he sees them there pretty often. And sure enough, he is, and he also knows that Koichi is coming because Popstep called Midnight to ask for backup, and so she called Eraserhead. It's neat to know that Midnight is a part of Pop's network now after the Mixer incident. And so Eraserhead takes care of the train villain. And it doesn't seem like the shop is basically an extra base of operations for him, because a little later, after the incident is resolved, when Tsukauchi comes to talk to him about the orally administered trigger and what they learn about it, they do so right in the shop. And in fact, the shopkeepers are actually participating in the conversation. And so, as seemed to be the case, orally administered trigger is less potent than the injectable type, and it also doesn't have the psychotropic effects, so it doesn't make people go crazy. But the theory the police have come up with is that it's being distributed so that people's quirks will go off in public, and then whoever has been modifying people's bodies permanently to make those designer villains, as they're calling them, will be able to tell who'd make a good candidate just by seeing people's quirks accidentally go off. And so then they can kidnap them and do whatever modifications they do on them and drive them crazy with injectable trigger at the same time to make the most effective villains possible. Interesting game plan. And so since the acceleration guy, who is distributing this, as well as the other types of trigger, he seems too good at getting away for the authorities to catch him, the shopkeepers suggest, hey, why not try and find the leader of this whole organization, find the head honcho, take out the head of the snake, as they put it. But the problem is, the police had done some chemical studies on trigger, and the composition suggests that it's made using materials found in China. It seems like a pretty difficult thing to find out with how worldwide most substances are these days. But they're pretty sure that the boss is in China, and Japanese heroes cannot operate freely in China. So they're kind of stuck. Eraserhead does float the idea of going there anyway, undercover, but then he says he's kidding. Perhaps in, in large part because there's an officer of the law right there, and maybe it wouldn't be a good idea for him to suggest breaking the law right there. But we cut to Hong Kong, and this mysterious cloaked figure enters an apothecary and says that he's ordering dim sum and that he is from far away. He, in order to come here, turned onto Nathan Road 7 times, and saying all that stuff is apparently a password to get into the back room of the apothecary where the less than legal substances, presumably including trigger, are housed. But after the shopkeeper takes the customer into the back room, he reveals that that was actually the old password. They changed it. And so he calls in some bodyguards, and the cloaked figure just disarms them, like, with no problem. He just takes them out without any real effort, it seems. And so the shopkeeper says, "Who the heck are you? How'd you do that?" And then he realizes that he recognizes him as Shupan Saikun. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Who was the Chinese hero Hyper Quad Fist. And apparently, as he exposits, his career was ended when his quirk was stolen and his face was split open by something. In fact, the assumption that everyone had was that he was dead. But then he says, "Well, despite all that, I'm here now." And he takes off his cloak and reveals himself to be a now bearded but still very recognizable Knuckle Duster. I was really hyped when I first read this chapter. It was cool to see Knuckle Duster again. It seems like there's more to his past than we originally thought, and that he wasn't just taking out trigger villains in an attempt to rescue his daughter, based on the fact that he knew this password. It would seem that he has had connections with the trigger stuff from a while ago now. And also the reveal that he used to be a hero before his quirk was stolen is cool, in China of all places. And obviously now that we remember his scar, and the fact that Hyper Quad Fist, based on the kind of the way he was drawn, it seems like he is the speedster, the old speedster that the nameless trigger dealing speedster looked up to and scarred his face in order to resemble. So he was actually looking up to Knuckle Duster this whole time, although I don't think he knows. I actually imagine now that maybe the reason that Knuckle Duster had his mask cover the top side of his face specifically is because if he's dealing with the Trigger organization, they might recognize him if they saw the scar. Um, so that was cool. And also, another thing with the nameless speedster is that when he beat up Octoid, the police noticed that the way he did it looked similar to how Knuckle Duster used to attack villains. So that also lines up in the fact that if he looked up to and copied Knuckle Duster's style, then the way he fights would be similar. Even though, of course, when Knuckle Duster is doing things in the modern day, he isn't using his quirk, but presumably he just does the same thing he did when he did have his quirk, just slower. Um, but this was a good reveal because everything makes sense looking back at the story. There's nothing that seems like it came out of left field. I mean, it did come a little out of left field, but there are hints that make more sense in retrospect, and I am very excited to see what happens from here. Next up was Food Wars 293, and so this cooking match between Soma and Sarge is announced that the theme is going to be Christmas cake. And everyone watching the match wonders why Christmas cake, because it's August in the story. But of course, the real reason is that this chapter was put out the week before Christmas, and so the author was probably in a festive mood. In story, the explanation is just, oh, the bookmaster decided that Christmas cake sounded like a good idea. It was a spur of the moment thing. And so right away, Soma admits that he does not have much baking experience. And so Sarge just calls him a pansy and whips out her chainsaw. But this time, instead of the seasonings covered blades, obviously, she has something different. Instead, the blades are shaped kind of like what you would use as a mixer attachment. So she can use it to mix her baking ingredients, which is honestly kind of clever. It's basically just a blender on a very large blade. So, and then she breaks up the chocolate for the cake with a sledgehammer. And the most extreme thing is to crisp the pie crust that she's using in the cake, because the cake will involve a pie crust, apparently. She uses a detonator. She uses an explosion to rapidly heat up and crisp the crust. And so the end result, as she proudly announces, it was her cluster bomb cake. And of course, the judges love it to bits because the judges love everything made in this series. And so the chapter ends with Soma beginning his own process with what looks like an ice cream bar stick. I have to wonder if he's had that since he was the convenience store, maybe. But at any rate, this suggests to me that if he's using an ice cream stick, then probably this cake might involve ice cream. So I'm predicting that he's going to make an ice cream cake. And incidentally, my birthday was the day after this chapter came out. And so when I read this chapter and thought about the ice cream cake, that ended up leading me to decide to get an ice cream cake for my birthday. And I very much enjoyed it. So I have to say, this chapter had very good timing to come out when it did, because I got a really good kick out of it. So I enjoyed this chapter very much. It was fun. I'm interested to see how Soma makes his cake. Stone 88 starts with Chrome hearing the news that they're working on a flying machine, and so he decides he's going to return to everyone else because he wants to help. He wants to ride the machine because he missed the car and he missed the tank, and he wants to be part of something. It's been a while since he's been a part of some big thing, And in particular, flying sounds really cool. So Senku calculates that at most they can bring 3 people in the balloon, because otherwise the heat they would need to bring themselves up to a high enough altitude to make a map would end up catching the cloth on fire. So 3 people is the limit. Self wants to go because he's the leader of this whole thing, and he realizes that they need to bring Ryusui because his ability to read the wind would be helpful, not just for sailing, but also for using a hot air balloon. Except again points out that if they ask him, he's going to charge them a lot of money, since he charged them a whole oil field to help them out with the boat thing. What's he going to ask for now? So instead, they decide that they're going to choose people by drawing lots using this deck of cards that apparently is they made a full deck of tarot cards, but they're just using the traditional playing card ones from that. And incidentally, I thought this was neat. They're all labeled with little scientific properties and stuff. I'm assuming that the manga artist of the group drew these cards, and so they say that whoever gets the Jokers will join. Usui thinks, oh, I see what they're doing. They're going to make it seem like I get it by chance, so that I don't think that they really need me, and then they hope that I won't charge them. But I'm going to charge them anyway. Maybe I'll charge them a little less because this is a creative plan, but I'm going to charge them anyway. So he draws a card, and he gets the Three of Hearts, which is definitely not the Joker. It's actually called the Theory of Evolution. And so Gen thinks to himself that when someone loses what they thought was assuredly theirs, that is when the psychological loss hits the hardest. And obviously that's when they want it more than ever. I'm sure that we've all experienced that feeling at some point. I know I have. And so Gen draws one of the Jokers himself, obviously using Sleight of Hand, but he plays up that he actually doesn't want to go, and, oh, it'd be nice if someone else could take it from me. But at the same time, even though I don't want to use it, it's super valuable, so I don't want to just give it away. And so they end up getting Ryusui to pay them for the privilege of riding the balloon, so they turned the whole thing back around on him. That was very clever. But then Chrome appears, apparently having run all the way back from Ishigami Village, which was where he and the others were waiting for the map to be made. And so he says, "Let me draw a card. I'm gonna get the winning card by sheer determination." But of course, Gen slips it to him anyway, using the forcing trick that he mentioned earlier in regards to the boat plans. How he said that, one thing that magicians use sometimes is making it seem like you have a choice, but in fact making you choose what they want. And so that's exactly what happens here. But Chrome gets the Joker. He's ecstatic. He's absolutely overjoyed. The Joker, by the way, is labeled the uncertainty principle. And so they go up 1,200 meters. It's very early morning when they put the balloon up. And they go just high enough, 1,200 meters is just high enough, that the sun is peeking out from around the curvature of the Earth and hits them several minutes before it hits the ground below. So the people down there looking up at the balloon, it looks like it's shining. That was a really neat touch. That's not something you think of, is that if you go up high enough, you can see the sun when the people on the ground haven't yet. And I bet this is going to look just gorgeous when it's animated. Chrome is moved to tears, and Senku says that, yep, this is really something. And once, as we develop more and more, we'll be able to go and see more of the wonders of the world. And Ryusui says, yep, because as it is now, the world is all ours to claim. I guess it's a step up that he's saying ours instead of the world is mine to claim. But, yeah, neat chapter. Very much enjoyed the card trick. And I'm assuming that next chapter will begin with them drawing the map. Next up was Chainsaw Man Chapter 4. And so Denji is apparently living with Hayakawa now. And we see the first thing he does in the morning is he's just eating bread with tons of stuff on it. He's living it up, for someone who's been as poor as him. Just being able to eat bread with a bunch of different things on it is like a dream. And so they get called out to deal with something called a fiend, which is a specific class of devil that takes over corpses. So presumably Pochita was a fiend, although Hayakawa tells Denji that Denji himself is not considered one because he remained in control. And so when they find the fiend, Hayakawa tells Denji, okay, show me what you're made of, do your transformation thing and kill it. But Denji just takes it out with an axe to the neck because he says that seems like that will be more painless, and since he, if Pochita hadn't been as friendly, could have just as easily ended up as a fiend, then he feels like he would rather give the guy a painless death. Of course, Hayakawa tells him off. He says, well, the fiend is in the devil is in control, so they shouldn't be given any second thought because they're all monsters. But Denji knows from experience that, hey, not all devils are bad. Hayakawa does not appreciate that remark because, as it turns out, his family was killed by devils, and presumably that is when Makima saved his life. And so he leaves, he's just disgusted. He tells Denji that he's the only one in the organization who isn't taking things seriously. But Denji says to himself that he very much is taking things seriously. Pochita told him that after he, fused with him to save his life, that he wanted him to live his dream, and so that's what he's doing. He's living the dream. That's what he's serious about. He ends up taking all of the porn magazines that the victim had, and he says that it is a good thing that I didn't go full chainsaw, because if I did, then these would have gotten splattered and ruined. But it occurs to him that, hey, he's already living what used to be his dream, so wouldn't it make sense then that he needs a new one now? And so his new goal in life is he wants to touch boobs someday. I love, I feel like a lot of people have that as a goal in their life. It's not something I think that most people would consciously set out as a goal, but and most certainly it's not something that you would expect a character in a story to say. But Denji really seems like an open book. He is fun. We get to see what he's thinking when he's thinking it. But yeah, he says that sure before there's no way that he would have expected to be able to do that. But hey, he managed to hug a girl, and so if he was able to do that, then hey, this seems so much more likely. But importantly, he takes a moment to remind himself that sure, Makima said that she liked him and implied that it was romantically, but he has to remind himself that, well, I shouldn't just get grabby because that would be rude. If, if I did that, then she might stop liking me, so I shouldn't do that. Um, he says, in fact, he thinks he probably shouldn't even ask, which, I mean, yeah, but but he still hopes that he can do it sometime. It's just really funny. I can't get over it. Um, but as the chapter ends, he is assigned a partner who's presumably also someone from Hayakawa's squad. And so his new buddy, as it is called, is a possessed woman named Power. So apparently they do let fiends into the organization. I have to wonder how hard it must be for Hayakawa to have her as part of a group, since he personally hates all devils, but apparently she's in. Um, and Denji's like, hey, sure, yeah, I'll work with her, that's fine, And I get to work with another girl, that's cool. In fact, seeing as how Power is in a somewhat similar situation to Denji, although in her case the devil is the one in charge, um, I would not mind if she ends up being the love interest, because it's a heck of a lot better for him to be with someone in a similar situation to him than to be with Makima, who still seems manipulative to me. Yeah, so I just can't stop thinking about Denji's goal. The series is really looking fun. I'm glad that it got picked up into the weekly updated series. Black Clover 187 was next, and so it starts with Droa using his mirrors to teleport Asta high up into the air. He just bounces him between all of the mirrors. I had forgotten that the mirrors have teleportation abilities because it's been a while since we've seen Gauche fight. But so he does this because he and Ekra are pretty sure that Ask is the most dangerous one, since he has uh, Licht's Demon Slayer sword, which apparently has the ability to remove the relationship between cause and effect. So that's how it removes curses and other things. Uh, these swords keep getting more broken. Um, Esta's response, obviously, is, well, hey, they're gonna try and paralyze me with Ekra's paralyzing gaze thing. I'll just close my eyes, and I can dodge Droa's blasts by sensing the key of them. But eventually he is overwhelmed because there are just a lot of beams coming from all of the different mirrors. But Henry throws up some of the pieces of the castle to guard Asta, and then, well, he is guarded before the beams can destroy that chunk of the castle. He manages to enter his demonic form, and so he just flies down, he breaks all of the mirrors. It was really cool. But as he gets over to Droa, and he's about to attack him, it turns out that Droa's left eye, or rather, Gauche's left eye would be more accurate, is made of glass. And so Ekra reflects her gaze off of his eye. All he has to do is just lift the hair covering his left eye, and Asta is stunned again. But the others managed to get up to his height using what's left of the castle, and they managed to block Droa's giant mirror blast by Gordon and Gray doing another combo spell. Gordon makes Poison Cloud again, but this time Gray turns it into mirror magic, so it can reflect the blast back. So this fight scene, I feel, was a bit more memorable than the one in the last chapter. Good stuff. I don't know if we knew that Gauche's left eye was made of glass before. At least I didn't remember it. But yeah, it certainly seemed to come in handy for now. In chapter 3, has Arata be approached by a dancer named Yuko, who knows that he is Neo, I think because Daigo's sister, while operating her food truck, rather openly refers to him as Neo when she gives him a hot dog. So, um, so Yuko comes over and says that, hey, I need your help. And by the way, she is a third person on the series' color spread, so we know that she's going to be important. And Arata turns her down. So she keeps leaving, but then she keeps coming back, only to get rejected again. But the gist of her request is that she believes her friend Saki was kidnapped. And she figures that since she knows that Neo loves bullying bad guys, that's his MO. I don't know how that got spread around so quickly. Then she thinks that should be something he's interested in. But he says, hey, it's entirely possible that she left of her own accord, so I might not get anything out of this. So I don't want to. But Daigo's sister says that in exchange for helping Yuko out, because Yuko is one of her best customers, she will give him 10 hot dogs on the house, since she knows how much he likes his hot dogs. But he actually declines the offer, and so she literally sweetens the deal by saying that he will get free dessert anytime he gets a meal. And she doesn't mention a time period, so that'll stack up a lot over time. So he says, okay, I'll do it for the dessert and the hot dogs. And so he goes with Yuko, and Daigo goes along too, because his sister insisted that he keep an eye on him to make sure he earns his reward. And they investigate Saki's room, and they figure, okay, whether she ran away or if she was kidnapped, they should be able to find clues here either way. And Yuko explains that Saki is very dear to the dance team. She's like a cheerleader for the dancers, sort of a cheerleader's cheerleader. And she actually made their team t-shirts. So she's very dear to them, and she helps them out a lot. But Saki herself doesn't have any self-confidence, that nothing bad happened to her while she thinks of herself that way, because she's really important to them. And there's a brief humor scene where both Arata and Yuko start their search in Saki's underwear drawer. Then Arata gets serious, gets down to business, and looks up her recent phone records. As a side note, Yuko She sees her underwear. She says, "How could an E cup be so unconfident?" That was that was silly. But so Arata discovers that a month and a half ago, Saki downloaded an app called the Lemming Game, in which a lead lemming sets missions for players to accomplish. So they'll do something, then they'll take a photo and send it in, and then they get points in the game. So it sounds pretty harmless, but Arata says that there was another game in Russia that had a very similar presence, the Blue Whale game, and that ended on the 50th day with a bunch of people killing themselves because that's what the instructions said. It was just a thing that slowly got people to focus on doing the instructions, and then somehow they get to the point where they decided that killing themselves was an okay thing if it would help them in the game. I'm not sure if this is referring to a real world phenomenon, but considering the kind of stuff that happened, I honestly wouldn't be that surprised if this is something that really happened. But so if this game is meant to operate the same as the Blue Whale game, then on the 50th day, the instruction will be to commit suicide. And this is the 49th day since Saki downloaded the game. So they have 1 day to find her, if this is what they think it is. I'm not sure if this is going to be actually what's happening, or if it's something else and this is a red herring, but only time will tell. One Piece 928 reveals that Raizo has been keeping in contact with Luffy while he's in the prison, and he's found a key that can free him from the Sea Prison Stone cuffs. Although he can't get to it yet because it's well guarded. He has to wait for an opening. Oh, we found out that he lost an arm, but he lost it while he was fighting against Shanks' crew. I mean, that's worthy of respect because taking on Shanks takes guts. I mean, even Blackbeard wasn't confident that he could take on Shanks. So then finally, the bulk of what we learn is that Komurosaki, the most beautiful woman in the land, is in fact a gold digger who has tricked a lot of men by claiming that they could buy her out of her contract to marry Orochi if they paid enough money. These guys have sold their houses because they are so transfixed by her, and they say, "Oh, we're going to help you," and then you'll marry me. And of course, she played up like, "Oh yes, of course I would marry you. You can only free me from my fate." But then she dumped him on the ground once they had no possessions left, and to top things off, because they could no longer contribute to the economy, they're all banished from the city, which is just dreadful. Especially when you consider the fact that since they have to leave the capital, I'm pretty sure that that means that the only food and water they can get would be the tainted food and water from the factories, and one of them was old and sick already. So it's just wrong. I do not like this lady at all. I don't care what kind of reasons she may end up having had to do that. That's just it's just horrible. Like, just no. And 117 has the girls managing to find the medicine, which is cool. But as they're leaving, they are discovered. Like, there are some demons that are waiting outside of the sewer entrance, if memory serves. They're all focused on Emma because she's from Gracefield, and so is thus prime food. But Anna doesn't have a weapon either way because Ray and Hayato took the weapons so that they could fight off the demons. Apparently, they didn't manage to get all of them. But luckily, Baghead arrives and slices the demons to bits. Apparently, his name is actually Zazie, and he is one of Minerva's confidants. So, presumably, those people we saw with him invading that mass production farm were her confidants. But as impressive as Zazie was, having been able to cut straight through the masks of those demons with his swords, he almost attacks Emma afterwards, and Hayato has to call him off. He explains that he's kind of a rabid dog when he's not around Minerva. So I just have to ask, why is he the one that Minerva sent out on his own to go and check up on Hayato and Jin? Because I assume that's why he sent them out. That just seems irresponsible. But yeah. At least at the moment, the hints that Anna might be particularly weak don't seem to have amounted to anything. Which, on the one hand, I mean, I guess that's good for her, but on the other hand, makes those panels seem like a waste. So perhaps they'll come in later. I don't know. And so then the chapter from December 30th was Hell's Paradise number 42, and so Yuzuriha, uh, she isn't gonna fight because Peace says that she's still out of energy, but she does give the other girls a coating of her sweat fluid stuff in the hopes that it could act as a sort of Tau armor thing that can keep them from getting the flower process started on them if the vines scratch them. Like maybe it'll be caught by the fluid, and then they won't have to worry about having to rip the flowers out and stuff. They can focus on fighting. And Shion actually notes by quote unquote watching the girls provide a distraction, because that's their plan. They're going to distract the Tensen Flower Monster while he tries to go in for the kill. Uh, he notices that Sagiri seems to already be better at sensing oncoming attacks using Tau than he is, which is very noteworthy because he's blind, so one would assume that his senses, including Tau, would all be greater. Um, so there's a really action-packed fight scene. Uh, it was enjoyable. I'm not gonna try and go through all of it, but the highlight, in my opinion, was when Shion got hit by one of the Flower Monster quote unquote legs, and he powers through it and slices through him so that the monster falls down. And then he manages to take its back and infuse his blade with Tau and hopefully slice it through both of the beast's quote unquote navels, because he's kind of got two torsos on top of him, kind of like stamens. I think that's, yeah, kind of like stamens of a flower. The chapter ends before we get to see whether it worked, but he does give a nice little speech either way about how at this moment he's solely consumed by negativity because he hates that he hadn't been able to save the other Asylum guy. I already forgot what his name was. I don't even know if I remembered it to begin with. But yeah, actually, it does seem kind of weird that he wasn't able to help him, considering he seems to be doing really well now. But so he says he regrets that, but now he's going to show you, immortal, what it means to die and the weight of death. And so that was a really neat little pre-mortem one-liner, I believe it's called. Uh, that was cool. Neat chapter, action-packed. Of course, it remains to be seen whether the attack works or not. So that's all of the chapters, the last chapters of 2018. And yeah, not much else to say about those, except I do intend to start talking about the Hell Warden series, because I gave that a trial read, and it does seem interesting. So I'll start talking about it with chapter 3, along with all the other chapters, which are going to be updated in the first week of 2019. So I hope that you enjoyed my rambling, and if you did, then feel free to leave a like and come back next time to hear me